Hello everyone,
Welcome to a review. Today we're going to be reviewing Only Fools and Horses Series 1.
Episode 1.
For those of you who don't know what Only Fools and Horses is, Only Fools and Horses is a critically acclaimed, notorious and iconic British TV comedy. It only had one writer throughout the series and specials, and that was the acclaimed John Sullivan, who both created and wrote it.
Also, fun fact, this is my favourite comedy of all time, out of any type of media.
Season 1, Episode 1, Big Brother. So the story is Rodney aspires to do more than drive a van and hold a suitcase and sell it down the market, and he feels held back by Del, so he leaves the family and goes out to make a life for himself.
First, let's get into the positives of this episode. Intriguing premise, it offers a more unconventional approach to a sitcom premise as it's a bit more interesting, which I can commend it for, since it's unneeded but appreciated. I like how the episode ties in its themes with its presentation. Rodney is of course complaining that he is underpaid, which when you look at the contrast between Rodney's and Del's clothes, it really puts forward the case well. You could have him stop there with no explanation, and the attire of Rodney compared to Del speaks volumes in Rodney's favour, as Rodney is dressed very raggedy and Del is dressed very prosperously. So yeah, the evidence does really well at proposing a case for Rodney, and it makes the plot all more stronger for it too. Right, so let's get into some of the jokes then. The joke where Del says for the first 3 months of their mum's pregnancy, Rodney was treated as an ulcer is absolutely hysterical. This is off the back of Del's long, over-exaggeratory rant about Rodney being an inconvenience to Del, considering their massive age difference and the fact Del had to babysit Rodney in his teens while all the other kids his age were having fun. Of course, as well, Del highlights the hyperbole by saying that their mum was 39, which is supposed to be a time to settle down where your kids are all grown up, which is another reason why it works as well. The layers of comedy in the humour of how much agony and annoyance Rodney causes is just perfect. As Rodney is trying to make a point that he can survive on his own, he then adds that he's going to the pub. Del says to survive on your own, then Rodney says, no, to get legless, I don't need you no more, Del, I don't need you for nothing. Then he fidgetingly and equivocally, while puffing out his cheeks, walks back in saying, Del, I was just wondering. Then Del hands him a £20 note. Great stuff. Hilarious joke. Just after that scene, you have Del saying to Grandad, I think he's just like you, eh, Grandad? Grandad says, what? Dignified in defeat? And Del says, no, a ponce. That has me rolling every time I hear it. You have Del talking about how Roddy's got no chance of getting a job because of getting caught smoking a joint in college. Del says, sir, yeah, I've got 2 GCEs, an 18-month suspended sentence, and I know a good joint when I puff one. This shows Del's manipulative side, of which we see throughout the show, as he takes advantage of Rodney here to make him stay with Del, where he's saying, you basically blown your chances, basically no employer will touch you, you're stuck with me and that's your own fault. It also introduces Del's incorrect French knowledge with him saying Vive la France, as they say in Rome. Another famous running gag on the show. And then the no need to get depressed, Rodney replying, oh, me? Depressed? No, of course not, Del. I'm on top of the world. I feel like a born-again eunuch. Yeah, side-splitting stuff. We got our first introductions to Trigger in a very different role from what would be his fixed position in the show as a road sweeper, but I still like him in this role. He pulls it off really well. Not sure why they changed it really. I like him in this role, because he works really well as this tremendously fake, incompetent klutz who's trying to be an illegal trader, but I guess he would be just a more extreme version of Del and Rodney. Extreme in a way of every fold of the comedy around their roles would be shared by someone who is miles more useless in every respective category than they are, due to how immensely gormless he is. So it'd probably be a potential worry that he would steal the limelight off of Del's and Rodney's calamities, and therefore their stuff doesn't hit as much, if I had to guess. Anyway, other than that, a very appropriate way to introduce Trigger to the show, with him calling Rodney Dave, a reoccurring gag on the show, that from the offset really gives you a taste of Trigger and his character, telling you he's not the brightest spark. And the great self of Nicholas Lyndhurst as well, with his confused look, astonishing acting there, and it's already planting a seed for season 3 where Rodney confronts Trigger on it. Sensational writing as well. As the scene progresses, you get some phenomenal jokes around Trigger. Rodney asking Del why do they call him Trigger? Does he carry a gun? And Del saying no, it's because he looks like a horse. Trigger saying that he is selling briefcases where he has one in hand and he states that there are 25 others, all told, but the others are in the car. He goes, I thought I won't wrap it up. Parcels attract attention, best to carry it openly. That way it doesn't look conspicuous. Del's face looking confused, then saying, oh yeah, that's great thinking, that Trig, yeah. Really good thinking. It goes really well with your slim back Wellington boots and your off-the-shoulder donkey jacket. Yeah, that's just dynamite right there, hilarious. You have the negotiation for the briefcases between Del, Rodney and Trigger. You got Del saying to Trigger, tell us the truth, are the police looking for these things? Trigger pushing the cases under the table, saying no, they are not, Del, and that's the truth. Then Rodney saying, why are you hiding it under the table then? And then Trigger goes, because you never know when they are going to start looking for them, do you? Great joke there. Then the price negotiations. You've got Del Boy saying how much, Trigger saying, to you, Del Boy, £17 each. Then Del saying, you know what happened to the real Trigger, don't you? Roy Rogers had him stuffed. Trigger saying, alright then, 14. Del, 14, leave it out. 5. Trigger saying 12, Del saying 6, Trigger saying 10, Del saying 9, and then Trigger saying 8. And then Del goes, done. Then Trigger to Rodney, because that's the way you do business, Dave. Another hysterical scene highlighting Trigger's stupidity. Roger Lloyd Pack's delivery on that last line as well is just gold. You've got Del on the phone to Dougie, one of Del's contacts in the trading game. Dougie mentions that 25 briefcases were stolen from him, and he mentions that they are reject, meaning didn't meet quality standards. Del laughs, saying, who'd be daft enough to nick them, eh? And who'd be dumb enough to buy them? And then Rodney starts pointing very intently at Del, and Del puts the 2 fingers up at him. Magnificent. The mention of why the briefcases are rejects, Rodney going, what's the combination? Del replying, no sod knows, that's why they're rejects. Rodney rebuttaling that there must be a bit of paper that came with them that gives you the combination. Del responds, yeah, they're inside the briefcases, innit? Rodney saying, nice going, Del Boy, you bought 25 executive briefcases that can only be cracked open by professional safecrackers. Then Del's rebuttal of, alright Rodney, that's the way I'm made. Into hell with the consequences. He who dares wins. You know, the French have a word for people like me. And then Rodney goes, yeah, the English have got a couple of good ones and all. Top level comedy there. Also, the he who dares wins line getting daylight in episode 1. Sullivan really fought ahead with these characters. That's another long-lasting line right there. Del and Rodney going back and forth on Del's bad decision. Rodney complaining about the respective roles in their partnership. Rodney claiming that he saw, due to his qualifications, saw himself in a bigger capacity of a financial advisor. Then Del referencing the scene with Trigger where Del is trying to con Trigger by working out the prices wrong on the briefcases. Del saying, I just about clinched a deal to buy these briefcases for £175 until my financial advisor stuck his oar in and told me I should pay £200. Now with financial advice like that, who needs a bleeding recession? Good line there. Del's justification of not listening to Rodney's advice and explanation of the difficulty he has including Rodney in their ventures due to being left with Rodney when Del was just a teenager, with their mother dying and dad leaving, is understandable and emotional because, of course, for upwards of 20 years he's been taking care of Rodney and has brought him up all that time. Del's got him this far on his own, why would he take any advice from anybody else? All he has known is to be Rodney's protector. It really humanises Del, but the joke Del makes at Grandad's expense, exaggerating how useless Grandad was, saying it was nothing to do with Grandad, he was an out-of-work lamplighter waiting for gas to make a comeback. An absolute napalm level joke. Such unique levels of creativity for that one. One of my favourite jokes of the entire show. Never fails to make me lose it, that one. You also have in the scene where Rodney's arguing for his independence, where he says to Del that he never let him do anything on his own, and that he even had to help Rodney with his GCSEs. And Del goes, passed in 2 subjects, and Rodney goes, yeah, well, I failed in the other 8, Del. I think it's really good. It really shows, once again, how much of a overprotector Del is for Rodney. Rodney coming back home, making up the story about Veronica and her millionaire dad, and how he was invited for dinner, but didn't go back because he wanted to come home because he was homesick, saying, I missed that, then pointing outside. Del saying, you must be joking. The people who missed that was the Ruddy Luftwaffe. Rodney saying that he has artist eyes. Del saying, yeah, you have pianist fingers, Italian footballer's legs. Ever thought of applying for a disability allowance? And then Rodney saying, I don't expect you to understand what I mean, Del, but you gotta suffer paradise before you realise what you left behind. Your home, your family. And then Del interrupting, your passport. Then Rodney repeating it, your passport. Then getting angry at Del for making Rodney go through his long thread of lying about being in France. Then at the end of the episode, you have Del and Rodney laughing together after Del asks if they should go to the pub or sail across to Veronica's dad's yacht for tea, and Rodney saying, nah, best not to go to the yacht, might bump into those bloody briefcases halfway. This is obviously in reference to when Del said that he chucked all of the briefcases in the river, based on Rodney's suggestion that he's made many times throughout the episode. So much layered comedy there, a good and proper way to tie in events too, sensational. The episode balances both plots really well. The build-up of Rodney leaving is played off really well, with the briefcase negotiation and him wanting to be taken seriously in the partnership, but not by Del. You also have a lot of justification for that, with Rodney taking the same risk effectively with their deals and the split, as said by Del, being 60-40 in Del's favour. Of course, I mentioned the clothes. Rodney's complaining of the way he was brought up with less than glamorous food and clothing. It all makes sense. Then the whole out with the briefcases, Del ringing every contact he has to sell them, the montage of Del going everywhere to try and sell them, but to no avail, so the great follow-through of him actually throwing them in the river off of Rodney's advice throughout the episode. I wish we would have actually had a scene though, where we see Del actually throwing them in the river, but yeah, it's still well done nevertheless. Acting's good throughout. Del and Roddy's argument was a particular standout, bravo there. Pacing is good too, everything is nicely introduced, and we move pretty steadily in this episode. I wasn't left bored. Right, let's get into the negatives now. The talking chess game part, having out of sync audio and speaking before Grandad presses the button sometimes. I'd expect more here, especially because it's such a simple mistake to fix in an editing software. I don't know how this got past multiple layers of production without being fixed before release, but it did. I think Del being unredeemingly condescending to Rodney throughout the episode, especially at the end when Rodney returns, is a bit much. You can see Del is worried about him when Grandad first informs Del that Rodney's left, but then at the end he makes Rodney's actions seem of those of what a kid would do to get attention. Del saying, "Oh, I knew it was just a moody." Granted, Del knew Rodney didn't take his passport, but that doesn't mean Rodney couldn't have made it a brawl about it, albeit illegally. He also could have made it out on his own within the UK somewhere. Sure, no money too, but he could have done all sorts to get the money. I don't know, it feels very gloating and snide for me. Regardless though, I think the revelation from this should have been in a more character development sense in Del's case. You know, I should take you seriously as a partner. You didn't make it to France, but you made it to Stoke, survived 6 days independently. I was wrong to not take your opinions, I was wrong to not value your independence, and now I will do that. Even if it's not on that basis, should we have the basis of Rodney being right about the briefcases, and that being a bad investment? There's a scene where they're arguing, by the way, where Rodney asks Del what he sees the partnership as, and Del says he sees it as Del's business acumen, contacts and money, and Rodney's ability to drive a free-wheel van badly. So on the back of that, when you have Rodney saying not to buy the briefcases and him being right, that shows that he has other value. That shows that he has more value than what Del gave him. So once again, there deserves to be praise for Rodney in that regard again. But yeah, it's just not given. Rodney advised Del not to take the investment, and he was right the whole time. There's grounds for appraisal there, but it doesn't go that way. Del just mocks Rodney. Rodney gets his satisfaction of knowing he was right because Del tells him, but Del doesn't praise him for it, or apologise, or try to do anything to undo his wrongdoings in any way. And we don't really fix any problems on Rodney's side or Del's either. We're just back to the status quo without anybody growing from it. It's kind of tone deaf in that way, this arc. Conclusion. This episode is coated in A-grade comedy, character establishment, show staples, an interesting premise, and more. Unfortunately though, despite that interesting premise, it falls flat, and there is no moral. Del is kind of insufferable about Rodney's whole escapade, and Rodney's right call on the briefcases are left mute. Both Rodney and Del's arcs aren't changed or fixed, and the whole episode, in terms of story, is near obliterated, aside from the briefcases thing. And yeah, it's left unsaid, but we can still infer, so it's got that. The one saving grace with this is that in a future series, Rodney trying to make it out on his own is revisited. So at least this is an introductory theme with Rodney's unhappiness, but as for the episode individually, it still drops the ball. Also a fundamental error with the unsynced audio. I give this one a 6.5 out of 10 though, because everything else is so securely densified. Other than that, that's it from me. Thank you all for watching.